Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining me today. Today, I'm with Sarika Singh. She's an award-winning communications coach and a seasoned public speaker with almost 3 decades, helping individuals, groups, teams understand and improve their self-confidence, their communication skills, whether that's written or verbal. She's also an online content creator. She's the host of Communications 101, Speaking and Writing Skills. It's a podcast where she discusses many different aspects of communication and regularly shares tips and ideas to help others improve how they express themselves. She has a way of sharing these concepts and ideas not just through talking about techniques and strategies, but through engaging personal anecdotes that helps bring them to life. Now, recently, she has been sharing ideas on how to be able to have and manage difficult conversations with people, and that's what we're going to discuss today. Hello, Sarika.
Hello, Darren. Thank you for such a beautiful intro. I'm flattered.
Not at all. It's nice. It's nice to be talking with you today. And I'm just going to jump right into this. We are going to be talking about difficult conversations, how we manage ourselves and how we communicate clearly and assertively and so on. But my initial question would be to tell us a little bit about your background. What got you into this line of work, specifically with communications?
Yeah, it's thank you for that interest and thank you for asking that question. Actually, a communication skills coach, the entire journey was quite a journey. I still am, and I always was an introvert, if you ask me. And becoming a communication skills coach was actually like discovering a hidden superpower. You know, like imagine Spider-Man, suddenly he realizes he can swing between skyscrapers. So
Yeah.
that's the kind of superpower. I used to be this very shy kid in school, and the shy kid who, for the life of me, dreaded to be seen, to be in the
Mm.
public eye. Forget about public speaking engagements. I remember I was only in grade three, I think about 7 or 8, when the teacher she assigned me for a last minute debate competition, and it was basically a nightmare coming true. She
I can
told
tell.
me just 30 minutes before the recess that I had to write the debate, I had to rehearse it, and then I had to contest it. So she kept reassuring me, it's going to be okay, Sarika. You just have to keep some points in your head and talk through them. And I thought, if she's saying it's okay, it probably will be okay.
Mm.
She gave me one very cute tip, which I always remember. She said, just think that the principal, who's the judge, he's sitting in the front row. He's wearing a clown nose, and keep thinking of the clown nose. So, I was too young to realize, to stress about it. And maybe I think I just found my teacher's suggestion really funny, but I wasn't sweating bullets. And so this might sound like beating my own drum, but that 8-year-old won that competition. And even then, I hadn't thought that this is what I'm going to do in life. Um, Fast forward to college, I did my BTech, I did my MBA. My family was into science. My dad was a very coveted scientist. So I assumed that this was my calling.
Mm.
And but that experience of that 8-year-old kind of stuck with me. And I continued doing whatever public speaking I could get a chance on. And I used to get this real kick out of seeing how, the right words, they could just change people's minds. It became like a game, and, kids, they love these games.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
slowly, with time, I realized I was the unofficial helpline for all sorts of scenarios like this. I would help friends make their presentations. I would help them fight the fear to present them. And
Mm.
then as a side hustle, because I was always a writer, very fond of writing, I used to enjoy teaching kids how to write stories and poems and essays. And I started coaching them on, presentations and
Mhm.
impromptus and all those kind of things. Slowly, I think with time, I found myself training in schools and doing workshops and literature festivals. And I think I was just loving the entire thing. I love it even today. And I'm, because my kick is that people find it meaningful. So
Yeah, yeah, it's a very
You
useful
know,
skill. It's
that's
something we all need.
yes, and because when somebody appreciates it, you get all the more motivated.
Mm, yeah.
But you know, by this time, I was sort of officially settled in the corporate world, and taking out you know, time for this as a full-time profession would have been a very big step, and I wasn't brave enough.
Mm,
But despite that, I found that even in the corporate world, I was volunteering for everything related to communication, whether it was packaging design, it was promotional communication, newsletters. I mean, I was just putting my nose into everything like that. And what really pushed me was, you know, and really bothered me was when I noticed that all these freshers who used to come from top tier colleges with,
hmm
you know, the best of degrees, fancy degrees, they did not know how to give an interview. When there was a group discussion, only the top manager was talking. It's
Right.
not that people didn't have the ideas, but they were very unsure of presenting those ideas.
How to express themselves. Yeah.
Exactly. And so that little help of, you know, helping colleagues, helping the newbies. So I realized that I could make an impact. I could, you know, make a
hmm
difference. And that actually led me to take the leap. And that's how Communicate 101 was born. And now every day I get to witness those aha moments. And, you know, I get people to unlock their superpowers, and I'm not willing to trade this for anything. I just totally love it. The podcast, you know, is just a medium. Communicate 101 speaking writing tips is just a medium through which I can connect with, I can help people anywhere in the world. I'm sure you can
Yeah.
relate to it because you do it with your channel. I mean, such great, impactful work.
Yeah, it's strange and something that never really prepared me when I first tried YouTube. I was expecting
Ah,
friends and family to
you have
watch, but
some fan following.
oh yeah, but what didn't what I wasn't prepared for was it really is a global audience. Because people, people all
Hmm,
over the place can get to see you. But I suppose
exactly.
the therapist in me is just thinking, just as you said, especially about the 8-year-old girl, and I think this is true at any age, as we start to grow up. When we face the things that we're uncomfortable with,
Hmm.
we start to become a little bit more confident, a little bit more courageous. If we fear the things we're uncomfortable with, if we're not careful, I guess, I'm trying sounds a bit too
Hmm.
dramatic, but if we're not careful, the things we're uncomfortable with, the things we fear might end up controlling us. We spend our lives trying to avoid them. So whenever we face those things, we start to grow in confidence. Our comfort zone
Completely agree.
widens. So yeah,
Completely agree.
so that's
Completely agree. And the way I see your passion with your work, I mean, it's just like find a job you love and you'll never want to
yeah,
work a day in your life. So that's pretty much my story
yeah.
too. So, you
Pretty
know,
good. Well, something I would like to ask as well is, in your experience working in communication, working as a coach with people, what are the things that you would find challenging, things that you might not have expected to come across, things that might come up when you're working with people? Because you mentioned a moment ago, very highly educated people, professional people, but they struggle to express themselves. So I'm just wondering what would be a common theme that you might pick up?
hmm yeah, but like, oh boy, starting as a communication skills coach, if you ask me, those initial years, it almost felt like diving into deep end of the pool with, you know,
Mm.
your floaties which have holes in them. So there were too many things, you know, initially in those initial days. First thing I faced and I felt was overcoming the imposter syndrome. You know, I
Mm.
used to look at the room full of expectant faces and you know, think, who am I to teach these people? I mean, believing like Maya Angelou, she said, I've written 11 books, but even today, every time I think, oh, they're going to find out. I'm
Mm.
running a game on everybody, they're going to find me out. So, but I think this insecurity is what keeps you going. Like you said, face
Yeah.
it head on. And
Mm.
that's what makes you work harder and harder.
Yeah.
The one of the biggest challenges that I faced, and I still go through it, is that you need to tailor it to suit it every time because there's no one size fits all.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
the approach has to be different for different personalities. You know,
You need to
you
be
you may
adaptable,
be
flexible. Yeah.
exactly. And it's like being a chef who wants to turn out that perfect dish, but the people who are going to eat that dish have different tastes, they have different dietary restrictions, they come from different cultures, different backgrounds, so it doesn't work for everyone.
Yeah.
You might have a CEO who thrives on bullet points, creative director who says, no, I need vivid stories.
Mm,
So you need to balance everything out. And that balancing is anything but simple.
mm.
Also, I think the one thing which, like you said, challenges help us, become
Uh,
better. I think staying updated with those ever evolving communication trends, it's very tough.
mm.
times
Yes. Yeah.
times are so fast that I mean, I'm a very hands-on person. I love to do things myself, so I'm continuously on that treadmill, but the speed of that treadmill just keeps fluctuating without warning.
Yeah.
So 1 minute you're trying to get a wee bit grasp on Insta, and the next minute there is COVID with strikes, and suddenly you're mastering Zoom calls. But I think all this also builds your adaptability, also builds your resilience.
Mm,
And till the time you're continuously learning, you can deliver, you can offer. Because
mm.
if you start learning, I feel you'll stop, you know, having enough to share with the world.
Yeah. There's something you said a moment ago I'd like to pick up on just to see what you think of this. You mentioned imposter syndrome, and it's something that I would have recognized in myself. But the more I've looked into it, the more I've looked at the research and some of the people, really high profile people that do have it. What I've noticed is it only seems to affect people who are pretty good at what they do. It only seems to affect people who are prepared to try, to take risks. It doesn't seem
Mm,
to affect people who just want to sit on their backside and do nothing. So maybe there is something in that. The imposter
yeah.
syndrome, it affects people who are prepared, as I say, to at least give something to go, to widen the comfort zone. And I think sometimes
Mm,
we can struggle between the difference between a healthy, normal level of self-doubt and the feeling like a fraud.
mhm.
There is
Hmm.
a huge chasm between the two. So today we're going to be looking at difficult conversations. In your experience, what are some of the things that can make a conversation difficult or at least seem difficult?
I think difficult conversations typically, if you ask me, they remind me of like a dense forest, a
Hmm.
very thorny forest where you have to tread each step very carefully, because you might hurt yourself, you might hurt somebody in the grass, in the bushes. There is
You might get
limited
lost.
visibility. There is limited visibility. You might get lost because the pathway is unclear. And so, like that, I think there are a truckload of factors which makes these conversations challenging and difficult. Because in all difficult conversations, the emotions run high. There are a lot of
Mm.
the stakes are very high. There
Yeah.
is fear of negative consequences, and this tension can lead to people acting defensively and eventually lead to miscommunication. So
Mm.
the stakes are too high, and that makes the conversation very challenging. Also, I believe because people, when they have different viewpoints, they come from completely different schools of thought. Finding a common ground is
Yeah.
like going to the moon. They could have some past experiences, they could have some biases, some unresolved conflicts, you know,
Yeah.
and all these things can add layers to the complexity. So, I mean, I particularly remember this coaching session with a client, Priyambada. I mean, I'm just changing names because I don't want to name
Of course.
anyone. She had to confront her business partner about some breach of trust.
Hmm.
And, she was very anxious. She was very fearful of damaging their long lasting, long standing relationship.
Hmm.
And so we worked on framing her concerns objectively, and empathy had to be brought in big time, because
Mm.
empathy was most important in this. And we used a lot of I statements instead of the the accusatory language, and so that she would not put her partner onto the defensive. And things like, instead of saying that you always exclude me from the decisions, instead of that she would say, I feel left out when
Mhm.
decisions are made without me. So, bringing those I statements and things which sort of tone down the complexity. And this subtle shift, I believe, um creates room for an open dialogue, for a constructive dialogue, and ultimately they can resolve it. So
Yeah,
yes, there are a myriad factors that cause these conversations to appear difficult.
and I think I would agree with you. Whenever we use statements like, "Well, you did this and you said that," the other person tends
There's
to
a
be very
fight.
defensive. Yeah, they become very
Yeah.
defensive. And what do they say is the best defense? A good offense. But I think it's interesting when you're saying that, because I noticed when I work with couples, I wouldn't say this is true across the board, but a lot of the time when I work with couples, the difficulties in the relationships come from their communication. They're not
Mm,
speaking to each other, but not just that they're not speaking, they're not actually listening. They might have something to say, but they're afraid of saying it, just as you mentioned with your example. They're afraid to say what it is because they think they're going to upset, they're going to offend, they might be rejected,
mm,
things might get worse. So, sometimes it might come across, they do say something, but it might come across maybe with a little bit of sarcasm, a little bit of passive aggression or something.
mm-hmm.
Sometimes they will say something, but it's nothing to do with what they're talking about. They focus on something else, but it's still a way of trying to get something across. So
Totally.
I think in relationships, and I talk about couples, but I think in a lot of relationships, the difficulties do come down to the communication.
Exactly. And this is so commonplace. Communication is just everywhere.
Mm,
And like you mentioned in couples, it's passive communication so many times, which is
mm.
worse than the aggressive communication, because sometimes they don't talk. There is no
Yeah,
communication.
they expect you to
It's
mind read.
it's like, exactly. And which is the worst scenario. I'm sure you're dealing with a lot of all sorts of communications, passive and aggressive and
Mm.
things like that.
Yeah, I think what we try to aim for is assertiveness, which I believe, and you can correct me, you can tell me what you think. I think when we're just being assertive, we're just being clear and concise. We don't have to be blunt. We don't have to be rude. We're just being clear and concise. I think that
Mhm.
often with our communication, that's what we're aiming for. So yeah, we're looking at the different kinds of communication. We mentioned about being assertive. There is the passive aggression, which I often think comes across like a joke with a jag. It's the sarcasm, it's the hurtful kind of humor. But there is also aggression. There's like intimidation and things like that. And when we talk about the communication, I always think in terms of listening as well. So we need to pick up on things like tones of voice. Someone's raised their voice, they're shouting, maybe they're trying to intimidate. Someone's looking at their feet and they're mumbling.
Hmm.
That's
Hmm.
being passive. That's
I
very
I
hard to
agree.
get.
I
It's very
agree.
hard to be understood.
In fact, I'll share this little story which I often share in my workshops, which
Mhm.
which makes people understand the different kinds of communication styles, and what to follow and what not.
Hmm.
So just imagine that you have a marketing team,
Hmm.
working on a new campaign, and there are, say, 4 members in that team. First, we have Pat. Okay, Pat is passive. He, he's that one who does this nod every time at meetings. He's rarely voicing any opinions. Even if he has a brilliant idea, he will never say it, because Pat is continuously worried he's going to cause waves. People are going to say something. So even if he's sitting on a treasure chest of ideas, he'll keep it locked away. Why? Because Pat is too shy to open it.
Afraid of being
So
criticized, maybe. Yeah.
exactly. And then there is Alex. He's the aggressive communicator. He bulldozes through meetings. He's that dominant person in the conversation with loud opinions. And if you've said something to him, he's full of criticism and he'll be very loud about it. If someone disagrees, I mean, his responses are very sharp. So people
Mm.
fear him. It's effective in the short term, but in the long term, the team is walking on eggshells. If he's your
Yeah.
friend, even you're walking on eggshells. You're afraid to speak up.
He doesn't win allies. Yeah, I get.
Exactly. And then now meet Sam. So Sam is agreeable. He seems agreeable, but he will drop those sarcastic comments. He will, sigh heavily when he's overlooked. He'll do that this.
Mhm.
It's like he's being playing a sneaky game. He's frustrated, but he's
Mhm.
hinting that frustration without directly addressing it.
Yeah.
So, with such a person, tension would build up. It would cause confusion and it would cause, mistrust.
Hmm.
So, he's that passive aggressive, uh, you know,
Hmm.
kind of personality. And then there is Taylor. She's the assertive communicator. She speaks confidently. She has ideas. She's willing to share. And most importantly, like you pointed out a while ago, she actively listens to others. And
Mm.
that also with respect. And when she disagrees, she does it so beautifully, so constructively, because she is focused on solutions. She's not
Yeah.
focused on blaming. She makes sure everyone feels heard, everyone feels valued.
Mm.
So I tell everyone that, you know, Pat, Alex, Sam, they can have their moments, but it's Taylor, it's her balance of confidence and empathy and assertiveness,
Hmm.
which is the key to success. So if
Yeah.
I would suggest it to everyone tuned in here. I mean, channel your inner Taylor. She's the recipe for effective communication.
Let your tailor off the leash. Yeah. Um, yeah, there is something that I think very important in what you're saying about listening. When we listen, even if we disagree with what the person's saying, and they might even be saying it in an aggressive manner, we don't particularly want to hear it. But if we pay attention, sometimes we might just learn something we didn't know a minute ago. Some people might be poor at how they communicate something, but you sometimes might just get a little nugget of something you didn't know a moment ago. So it is worth listening. And I think some of the things that stop us listening is we might just focus on maybe a keyword or a phrase. We're not listening to the whole thing. We're not necessarily paying attention to body language, tone of voice. Sometimes someone could be talking and we're just thinking of an answer. So when,
More than often. More than
yeah,
often. This happens all the time. You're just waiting for them to shut up and so that you can reply.
yeah. So you haven't actually heard what's being said, and there's something you said a moment ago. Yeah, I would agree. It's about looking if there is some kind of contention, it's about looking at a resolution. Not it's
And
not always about looking at winning.
there is also this one unique thing which I've found. There is selective hearing. When couples are fighting or arguing, they
Yeah,
will listen only that portion which works in their favor. So there's this selective hearing, which is really
filtering.
amusing.
Yeah, we filter. The example I use sometimes, it's like one person says, "Oh, we've no milk left," and the other person hears, "You're not getting any tea." And so now you have an
Yes,
argument over something that wasn't there in the first place. So
you've
yeah,
nailed it. Yeah,
yeah, I
yeah.
think it's the filtering can play a large part in it. Um, Whenever we're hearing a no, sometimes someone can be very disagreeable, and it's everything's a no. But sometimes someone might be saying a no, and we do not like being told no. I don't think anybody likes it. But you think of the difference between a reaction and a response. When someone hears a no and they don't necessarily like the no, what would your suggestions be about dealing with the no, about the reactions or the responses?
This is getting so wild because hearing a no, it can sting, and
Mm.
it stings like most of us. It's all about how you bounce back from that no.
Hmm.
Think of it like you're trying to unlock a door
Okay.
with the wrong key.
Right.
It's just telling you to try another one and another one.
Hmm.
So when I was launching my first workshop, I remember a major client declined my pitch. So I was devastated. I was very upset about it, but I was also new in my career, so I was more open to ideas. As you grow
Yeah.
mature in your things, you start becoming more rigid in your ways of working. But I was young, and instead of sulking, I asked for the feedback. And turns out They just needed something more tailored. So I adjusted my approach and later I got a yes. So that no was not really that get lost. It was not that. But we often take it like that.
It feels like a
You need to,
rejection.
it feels like a rejection, and you need to reflect on what the other person needs, whether, what is the timing right, is the perspective right, is it a rejection of you? But
Mm,
because every no is not a rejection for you, it's it's like they say that every no takes you only closer to a yes. So
mhm.
use a no as a stepping stone. Use it like a part of your learning. I tell my clients, imagine you playing a video game. Each no is just a level you have to beat, to reach your goal. So no will happen. You play snakes and ladder. Every time there's a snake which comes, brings you down.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you stop playing the game. So embrace a no. Learn from it. I mean, it's difficult, but it's not a dead end. It's just a chance to pivot. So
Mm.
that's how I look at it.
And as you're saying that, what I'm thinking is it's really about it's looking at the negotiation. We might get a no. And sometimes if you think of a negotiation, you might not get 100% of what you want, but 50% is better than 100% of nothing. We might get something, we might get a step closer to something. We might not always get what we want, but we might get what we need.
And more refined,
Mm,
something which we really need, maybe
yeah,
more tailored to our requirement.
yeah. And but sticking with the no, because it can sting. We are going to meet people who can be quite disagreeable. That everything is going to be no, or they're going to be, if you will, that they're going to push agendas on us, they're going to demand from us. And there are people who struggle to say no.
Yes.
They have poor boundaries. They find it difficult to say no for a myriad of reasons. So I'm just wondering what
I
your
think
thoughts are.
most of us, most of us are struggling, and
Mhm,
a lot of people find it difficult to say no.
mhm,
So I've seen folks grapple with this for a bunch of reasons, many, many reasons, I would say. I think the first one, most important one I've seen is that it's a classic fear of rejection,
mm, yeah.
fear of conflict. Imagine you're at work, your colleague asks you to take on an extra project. You already have your plate full, you can't say a no, but you're worried. If
Mm,
I say no, I look uncooperative. This could lead to tension. He may hold it against me.
mm,
And that fear of rocking the boat, it can keep you nodding a yes while you really want to say that no, you know?
yeah.
So it's like, I want to do it. Your head is doing a no, but you're trying to say a yes. And, there are some very sweet people. I used to be one of them, who are too sweet to say a no. They will just have to be liked and they just have to fit in.
Mm,
Imagine you have a new job, you want to create a good impression, and your boss, he generally asks you if you can stay late to help with a report. You want to say no because you're a fresher, it's you have plans, it's your best friend's birthday, but you don't want to say that no.
yeah.
You want to be seen like a team player, and so you agree. You mess up your evening, but you say that, you
And
can't say that no. You say
afterwards,
yes.
you're regretting it.
Absolutely. Even while doing it, you're regretting it. Even
Yeah.
while staying there, you're regretting it. While nodding that yes, you're regretting it, but you are still doing it.
Mm,
And some of us also struggle with lack of assertiveness
mm,
because, and I've seen it very closely, very personally, that many of us have not been taught to express our needs, how to set boundaries, how to say that no. We've always told to comply.
mm,
I once quote someone from who would agree to everyone. The colleagues asked, we really had to struggle working on her assertiveness because she also came from a cultural background where uh, a no would mean somebody's being disrespectful or rude.
mm.
So sometimes there are cultural norms, there are societal norms, which also make it difficult for a person to assert. So you slowly need to build up confidence in that person.
Yeah. Again,
And yet,
going back.
I also think there's a bit of perfectionism, and some folks
Yeah.
thinks they have to do everything perfectly. They have to please everyone. to be valued.
Mm.
So their training involves that, you start to help them realize it's okay to prioritize yourself. You're not doing anything wrong. You put yourself first sometimes.
Yeah.
So I think with a lot of the good news is that with a lot of practice, with a lot of right strategies, anyone can master this. It's not difficult, and
Yeah.
that's where I come in.
Something that I would sometimes say to people is to think about, and I've said this in a live stream once or twice. We will fear saying no for a lot of reasons, for a lot of the reasons you've outlined. I would agree with everything you'd say. It's the fear of rejection and so on. We fear disappointing people. We don't like to feel disappointed, so we don't like to disappoint others. Sometimes we might see a power balance or something, we feel afraid to say no. But if it is just about rejection or disappointment or whatever, sometimes you have to give people permission to be disappointed. That doesn't mean we're being selfish or anything. And this is the thing about disappointment. Some people will be disappointed for a moment. They're not necessarily going to hold it over you for the rest of your days.
Hmm.
They probably got over it by the time they've hung up the phone or by the time they've asked the next person. And going
Hmm.
back again, the facing the things that we're uncomfortable with, sometimes you need to practice little small no's and little safe measures, you know, with people
It
you feel
starts
comfortable
small.
with. Yeah, you just
True,
practice.
true. You have to start small. You can't suddenly learn how to say no. To start with very small little things.
I think someone once said this, and I thought this was a good way of putting it. Sometimes no is a complete sentence. We don't need a long, convoluted
Yes.
explanation.
In
We can
fact,
give.
I had very recently I was doing a series on no, how to say no on my social media handle, Insta handle, which is hashtag communicate 101. So there is a clipping from a movie wherein, I don't know if you know Amitabh Bachchan, he says no is a full sentence.
Mm,
It doesn't need any explanation. It doesn't need
yeah,
any justification. A no is a no is a no.
yeah. I think one of the things we do, it's quite common with all of us, we will say no. And we might give an account, might give a reason. We might say, I don't have the time, I don't have the resources, or whatever. But quite commonly, what we do is we'll say no and then go into these long explanation type apologies. And it's almost
Yes.
by the end of it, we have talked ourselves out of it and we're nearly saying, yes, okay, then. Another person's.
This is so true. This is so true. So the best thing is just say no, be firm about it,
Mm.
be clear about it, don't lose your focus, don't talk extra, just breathe.
Yeah, it's like I always think of the salesperson. You know, that person is trying to sell you something you don't want or need, but they've decided you're buying it, and you have to explain to them that you're not. The more information you give, the more they'll use that to talk you around. So the more
Very
information.
beautifully. I love your example because it's so relatable
Yeah.
and it's very true. So the more you talk, you're giving them reasons to convince you.
Yeah, the more you're talking, the more they can undermine those reasons. If you say, I don't have the time, I don't have the energy, I don't have the resource, what more do you have to say? And you just, I
So
know
in
it sounds,
marketing, we are taught that if you can't convince them, confuse them. So it works.
okay. Um, you're talking about the saying no and the difficulties that we have with saying no. Um, Sometimes when we're dealing with other people can be very difficult. Even if we're saying no, they keep on. It's trying to chip away at us, just like that salesperson. I mean, what would your thoughts be on handling someone like that? Someone who is maybe manipulative or something.
Oh, that's a very difficult one. And in fact, I would put that question on you because you deal with a lot of personality traits
Hmm?
for people who are dealing with, difficult conversations with people with um, difficult personality traits.
Well, that's answering my own question. I think we what I say is we give an answer, and that's the answer we give, and we just keep repeating the answer. Doesn't matter what's being said. It doesn't matter. Sometimes, depending on the person, I mean, we don't want things to get too sticky or whatever, too contentious. Maybe it's just about withdrawing, even.
Hmm.
But for me, it is just saying whatever it is and sticking to it and repeating the same thing, even when someone is picking up on something that we've said and maybe trying to misrepresent it somehow.
Hmm.
We just keep sticking to
And
the same point.
I agree. I agree what you're saying. And in fact, typically with manipulative people, see, the more you talk with them, the more they'll manipulate you.
Mm.
So just don't play the game. Just be out of that game. If you are out of that game, they can't manipulate you more and put you in a more difficult spot.
Yeah, even just
So,
thinking things like, I've already answered, especially when you keep getting the same question. I've already answered you.
I've put my mind into it, and this is what I think. End of story. This is these are my thoughts on the topic. So whenever you're ready to listen, we can talk again. Give it a pause. Sometimes
Mm.
conversations get better when you give them time. When you go back on it, when the other person is more ready, more receptive to understanding or to receiving your thoughts.
That sounds, I like the sound of that. That sounds like a really good idea. Sometimes, again, if tensions are very high, it's hard to resolve something when tensions are very high. When we withdraw or when there's a break of some kind, moods can come down, tensions can come down. It might be a little easier to
Hmm.
talk. It also, what I'm thinking as you're saying that, that gives someone a space to maybe think creatively about how do I reinforce my position? How do I continue to, if I have to keep saying no, or if I have to keep asking for what it is I need, it gives someone that space to think creatively. Well, so you're not necessarily feel as if you're on the
Any
spot.
communication I feel which is done in a rush, in a hurry, from both sides, if you're reacting to it or you're responding to it, like you talked about responding and reacting, I think that pause, that time that you need to give each other is very important.
Mm. It's hard to shake hands with a clenched fist. So yeah, that little pause is good. And the other thing I would say is we're talking about, responding. If you're talking to someone who is maybe trying to elicit some kind of a response from you or get you to say something you don't want to say, get you to say yes when you don't want to say yes. I think whenever we react to someone, they have control. But if we respond to them, then we have control. It's just something I think. I don't know what your
That's
thoughts on.
very deep, and I'm glad you brought it up because one needs to understand the difference between a reaction and a response,
Mm-hmm.
and what ideally should be given to make your communication more effective and more impactful. Because, like I would say, imagine you're in a meeting with a client, for example, and suddenly they criticize your proposal. It's like a big no
Mm-hmm.
and coming very harshly to you. Now, if you react in that scenario, but you're dying to, it's like that knee-jerk action.
Yeah.
Maybe your face turns red, maybe you snap back defensively, maybe you rush to justify yourself. But your reaction is quick. And often this is fueled by emotions, like an
Mm.
automatic reflex. The emotions are very high when you're reacting.
Yeah.
Now, let's try to flip the scenario a little bit. What happened when instead of reacting, you chose to respond? So, when you chose to respond, you take a moment, you breathe, you consider what was said, and mentally, in those few seconds, weighing the pros and cons, you think about your next move. You may say something like, I appreciate your feedback, but can you help me understand which parts of the proposal didn't work for you, or
Mm-hmm.
you want, they concerned you more?
Mm-hmm.
But your approach is calmer. It's more thoughtful. It's not like you're getting offended.
Mm.
And it's a strategic approach. You're trying to arrive at a solution.
Yeah.
once, my colleague, Saurabh, he's very smart when it comes to dealing with these kind of people. He faced a similar situation. We were pitching a new marketing campaign to
Uh-huh.
a big client, and this client, for some reason, was not impressed and started pointing out flaws in our plan. So he could have reacted by arguing or getting upset, but instead, and I was, that silent observer, he chose to respond with a pause. He nodded. When the
Mm-hmm.
client is saying no, he's nodding in affirmation. That itself brought the tone of the client down.
Client was being
Then
acknowledged
he
or being heard. Yeah.
Yes, and then he asked the client to elaborate on their concerns, very calmly, very peacefully, trying to work it out. And this not only diffused the tension, but also showed the client that, we valued their opinion and we were committed to finding a solution. So I would always, always prefer responding instead of reacting, whether it's with our children or with, in the personal space or with adults, professionally. Responding always shows maturity, always builds trust, and always leads to a more productive and a more positive outcome. And that's what we are trying through effective communication. That's
Yeah.
why we need to work on our communication skills.
Well, what I would say to that is you're saying that makes perfect sense. But if I put it to you this way, what you're doing sometimes, first of all, you're acknowledging the other person what they said, whether you liked hearing it or not. You're acknowledging that you've heard it. But what you're also doing is, if you will, you're asking for clarity. You're not necessarily jumping to a conclusion, which sometimes we can do whenever we're reacting. You're right, the reaction's out there at the speed of light sometimes. Um, I think asking for clarity, asking for a bit of understanding, it depends on what the person has said, but help me understand that a bit more. What do you mean by that? Or do you know what I mean? And I think sometimes when you are doing that with someone, it can help, if I say it slightly differently from you did, it can help de-escalate things a bit because
Yes.
you are showing attention.
Hmm. True, true. It'll de-escalate things, definitely. And when the other person also feels that he's being heard, you're
Hmm.
trying to understand him, then he
Hmm.
feels you're in his team.
Hmm.
And when you both are in the same team, then you try to work it out.
Yeah. Goes back to, I guess, the art of negotiation, which requires a bit of listening as much as
Yes. And
indeed.
that
Yeah.
negotiation with whether it's with children, whether it's with uh, grown-ups,
Our
it's it's
partner, our
it's
next door
a
neighbor.
yes, it's none is less than a Herculean task.
Yeah, doesn't have to be. Something else I'd wanted to ask you about in your experience. Um, the people who refuse to listen, but they're trying to put you into a corner. It's almost like they're giving you your options. It's either left or right. It's yes or no. It's like they're giving you options. They're backing you into a corner. And sometimes we can feel under pressure because sometimes we think that's the only options we have, but we can feel under a lot of pressure, and especially to maybe answer straight away, it's a yes or a no, and we fear the no, for instance. How do you deal with situations like that? Someone just really, really backs you up, if you
Yes.
know what I mean.
Oh, we've all been there, haven't we?
Yes,
You're in the
repeatedly.
middle of explaining a great idea, and suddenly you're faced with someone who just won't listen. Maybe they interrupt, maybe they twist your words, maybe they feel like make you feel like you're on a trial. Either way, it's frustrating, right? And then you're basically dying to land them with a saucepan, and you can do anything but that.
Mm,
you need you cannot change people's reaction. You can only change your reaction.
mm,
How you respond to them is what is in your control. So just stay calm. That's the first rule of any communication game that you want to play with anyone. And I'm calling it game not to make it sound derogatory, but
no, I get it.
because it's a we all play it. You need to stay calm. I know it's easier said than done, but think of think of it like this: when someone is being difficult, they are looking for a reaction. And if
Mm.
you stay calm, you stay composed, you're not giving them that satisfaction. So you take that deep breath, maintain that steady eye contact, and keep your voice level. Be that tree with, even if there's a big storm, it stands strong and unwavering. Bend a little, but don't
Don't
don't bring
break.
your pitch up. Yes, don't break. Don't bring your voice up.
Mm.
Sometimes people act out because they feel unheard. A trick I've taught in my trainings that people love is like not to just repeat back what the other person has said, not in an angry tone, but just to show that you've understood their point. I
Mm.
mean, for example, you can say something like, "So what I'm hearing is that you are concerned about X, Y, Z. Is that right?" So you're saying that you are hearing, you are listening.
Hmm.
It also gives them a chance to clarify in case there is any misunderstanding or you've not understood it the correct way.
Yeah.
There can also be times when they're misrepresenting whatever you're saying. And so
Yeah.
here, firmly correct them. Use the I statements. I believe there might be a misunderstanding here. What I meant was
Mm.
whatever, whatever. So use those I statements. It helps the conversation focused. It makes sure it's constructive.
I like that phrase. I believe there may be a misunderstanding here. That
And it's
sounds
very
very,
important to put those I statements because you also need to set boundaries. It's perfectly okay to say, I feel this conversation isn't productive right now. Let's take a break. Let's revisit it later. It doesn't show you're retaliating, but
mm.
that you're just willing to engage on more respectful terms.
Yeah, and I like that idea. It's just we can bend, we can be flexible, but what we're not going to do is we're not going to break, and we don't rise sometimes to that provocation that we can get
It's
sometimes.
too tempting.
Yeah.
And another thing we often forget is we forget to follow up, which is something we should never ever do. Because sometimes cooling off and revisiting the conversation later can lead to breakthroughs.
Yeah. It's like
And I
tensions will
always
come
say it,
down.
dealing with difficult people is a part of the journey. They will be there.
Mm.
There's no point thinking of avoiding it. You can only learn to get better at it.
Yeah. And there is something that in if we fear getting it wrong, well, we are going to get it wrong and we are going to make mistakes because we don't learn anything unless we do. But we have to learn each and every time. And I'm just thinking, yeah, we might deal with someone, and we've said yes, we meant to say no. There's someone has put us into a corner. They might be misrepresenting us and so on. Even if we have agreed to something we don't want to do, is it really unreasonable to change your mind? No, I don't think so.
I don't think so too.
No, sometimes I think that's one of the things that holds us back. We fear that we cannot change our mind. We've maybe agreed to something. We can go back and we can say, look, I've thought that over, and no. It can
But
go
very
the other
often,
way. It can go the other way. Actually, I've changed my mind. I would have time to do that for you. Do you know what I mean? It can go either way. We can give ourselves permission to change our mind.
yes, but I would also say that that time don't say a yes till the time you're absolutely sure you
Till you're
can do
sure.
it
Yeah.
because somebody else has allocated that
Mm.
particular project to you or whatever task to you,
Well,
and
in a
now he's
work,
believing that you're going to do it.
yeah. In a work
And
environment,
then
that might be
hmm,
different. Yeah, I'm just talking about even just in our everyday life, I
hmm,
think we can give ourselves permission to change our mind. We might be disappointed if someone else changes their mind, but we generally be quite understanding of it. Something might have come up for them or whatever.
give
We
them
for
that benefit of doubt.
Yeah, we forget sometimes we can.
We talk about how we reject the idea of saying a no, but we reject the idea of hearing a no as well. We don't
Mm,
like to hear a no.
yeah.
Nobody likes to hear a no. We get very offended when somebody says a no. We feel, oh, how dare he?
I deserve this. I'm special. No,
It's
I
like
get what you
that
mean.
do it bomb, that your boss is dropping on you.
But whenever when it comes to situations where there might be some kind of a contention, there might be some kind of a breakup, there might be something going on in work, there might be something in our personal lives, there can be a disconnection, there can be a breakup, even a breakup of a relationship or something, and things can get messy sometimes.
Absolutely. I mean, whether it's parting ways with an employee or it's a personal relationship,
Uh-huh.
I think it can get really messy if your communication is not clear, because that clear communication can make a world of difference.
Mhm. It's
Personally speaking, not so long ago, I had to do what I absolutely hate. I had to let go of a team member who was underperforming. It's never easy. I mean, I try to give them chances after chances, giving feedback, trying that some way they can perform, but this one wasn't working out. So this hit close to home. So, I had to practice what all I was preaching, what all I was training people on. I had to let go of someone.
mm,
So if it hadn't been so many years of experience in communication, maybe it was very difficult for me as well. So, um, but this way, this time, instead of beating about the bush, instead of uh, you know going around talking about it and not coming to the point, I sat him down. I had a very candid conversation, but I always tell everyone, and I practice this myself, I acknowledged his contributions. I started on a positive note. And then I explained, the specific areas where things weren't working out. I tried to remain clear, compassionate. And I remember saying something like, I want you to know that, I really appreciate your efforts, what all you've done, but I've noticed some
yeah.
things which have been going on where performance hasn't improved despite the feedback. I think it's best to part ways so that you can also find something which really excites you, some
Where you
role
will
which really
thrive.
excites you.
Mm,
Exactly, where you will thrive. And thankfully, he didn't feel blindsided or he didn't feel resentful. We still
mm,
talk. And I feel that suppose I had abruptly fired him with minimal
yeah.
explanation, there would have been a chaos. There would be bitterness, and definitely it would have burned bridges.
Yeah.
So even in my the 3 episode difficult conversation series that I did on my podcast, Communicate 101 Speaking Writing
Mhm,
Tips, I suggested 3 principles. I'll just say them briefly. So, first thing is be sure of setting and start with a positive note. Make sure that
mhm,
the person is in a closed space with you, not in a public environment. So be sure where you're doing the talk.
mm,
Start with a positive note. Explain the issue, but stay firm. Don't get distracted. Don't try to get confused and convinced why you should not let him go. You want to let him go.
mm.
Share concrete examples. You should be able to point out, okay, these are one, two, three things which have not worked.
Yeah.
The company cannot afford the fourth one. Also, offer alternate routes and resources where you can support. Can I write you a recommendation?
Mm. So
So,
you're trying to separate on good terms.
good terms. And you start positively, you end positively.
Yeah.
Only in the middle you talk the crucial, difficult part.
The
Then the
reasons for the
difficult,
breakup. Yeah, the
then
reasons
the
for it.
difficult conversation will become simpler.
Can I share a personal example with you about a breakup of a relationship?
Please go ahead.
I'm part of a group of friends and we meet up every now and again. And there was one of the group. She'd been dating this guy. She'd been dating him for about 6 months. She just wasn't into him. The magic wasn't there, if you know what I mean. And she tried to been on dates and things, and she tried to break up with him several times, but he kept saying, we could have something wonderful here, that sort of thing. And he's so devoted.
Hinting.
Yeah, yeah, and how great how good he is there, and he's really in there, and he could be the best thing ever happened there, and all that sort of thing. And she's look, he is a nice guy, but I just don't feel it, you know. But we were talking one night, we were all having to get together, and she'd written this email of trying to explain to him why she didn't want to date him. and she says, "What do you think of this?" And she started reading this, and honestly, it was like War and Peace. You know, this person took it off and started
I was about
scrolling
to
through.
say it must have been a whole encyclopedia of
Absolutely, you know, it's just scroll after scroll. And it was
uh,
one of the people in the group. I thought this was wonderful. She says, "Look, let me have a look at that for a moment." And she took it and she just deleted everything and typed in, "You're a really nice guy, but this just isn't working for me," and handed it back to her and said, "How does that sound?" It just got
I
to the
mean,
point.
these days, divorces happen on a WhatsApp message or
Mm,
a emoji, all those kind of new
yeah,
gen things
yeah,
that are happening. I mean, I would just always say that please don't be so blunt. A lot of resources, a lot of
yeah,
mental and all sorts of resources. You're emotionally invested somewhere.
yeah,
Uh, at least communicate. At least give the other person a chance to
yeah.
discuss it out, talk it over, and part. You have to part ways, but on good terms, whether it's in business or it's in personal life. Either ways, keep your communication such that whenever you meet that person, that company, that executive, anywhere down the line, you meet each other, graciously with a smile,
Yeah, yeah. I
not,
think in her experience though, in fairness to her, she had tried to break up with him several times. He kept talking her into one more date, just one more date. What do you say? One more date. I think she was at the end of her tether.
Yeah,
And that's
and it
why she
doesn't
was.
it happen when you're trying to surrender your credit card. The company will say, "Please, we'll give you a free, these
Mhm.
coupons, these upgrades, these vouchers. Just try us for one more year. We're not even charging you a membership fee, but just keep us for one more year." So
Mhm.
they're trying to convince you.
You get talked, you just get talked into it. Yeah, I know what you mean. Listen, is it okay to maybe ask you a few personal questions? Because I suppose I'm wondering,
Sure, depends how personal they are.
what sort of things bother you? What sort of things frighten you?
Huh. So I may be a communication skills coach. I may be whatever professionally, but I'm very scared of misunderstandings. I think
Hmm.
people misunderstand each other and they don't talk to each other for lifetimes. It's
Mm.
just very sad. It's just
Yeah,
very sad. I'm very scared of being in that space anytime with anyone. I'm very scared
that's
of misunderstandings.
that's a good example. A lot of contention usually does come through misunderstanding. As we were saying earlier, maybe not listening, or if you don't understand, not asking for some kind of clarity. I think it's human nature sometimes, especially if we feel very passionately about something, we can jump to a conclusion and we decide,
We just live with that bias. We just live
yeah,
with that thought that okay, no, that's what he means, or we extrapolate and interpolate, and I don't know what we make out of nothing.
yeah.
And the best of relationships, they stop existing.
Mm. So, what would you call your biggest strength when it comes to being not necessarily a communications coach, not necessarily when you're talking about your public speaking? Could well be, but what would you consider to be your biggest strength?
I think my biggest strength, as a person, I think my biggest strength is I'm just very patient. I don't I don't jump into things.
Mm,
I If somebody is talking to me, I'm very patient, hearing him out, resolving something, giving them benefit of doubt. Sometimes I'm a bit too patient. I think it's just in me, more of a DNA trait. I focus more on the positive motivation than giving a punishment, than giving a negative motivation. Something like they teach you, for dog training, work on positive motivation.
yeah,
So
I
I
think
think
no,
we humans follow the same thing too. It just
no, we do.
doesn't work only for dogs.
You'll find this whether this is in relationships, this is in community settings, this is in families, this is in workplaces. You can have someone who can be very, very harsh and very stern, and they rule almost like with a rod of fear. But what they don't have is loyalty.
Yes.
They don't get the best out of their people. They just get people to comply. I think there needs to be a,
It's
a a
it's very
balance.
unfortunate. It's very
Yeah.
unfortunate. Everybody is walking on eggshells.
Hmm. Sometimes it's eggshell, sometimes depending on the situation, it can feel more like you're on a minefield. You're afraid to take another step because you don't know what you're going to stand on. So yeah, I think sometimes it takes a bit of balance. In all our relationships, we need to have a level of being stern, not being rude, not being harsh. We need to be stern, we need to be clear, but we also have to give a bit of positive regard, positive affirmation as well. We have to, even just good manners. Thank you, appreciate that. Just that
I
it's
think talking to oneself, you need to talk to yourself and really know what is bothering you. Why saying that no is bothering you? What is the big worry? Is
mm,
it losing the job? Is it that you want to please him or her? Is it what is it? Once you identify the problem, like they say, you go to a doctor. Once the disease, the diagnosis is done,
mm.
then the problem is half solved. So talk to yourself, ask yourself, what really is the problem? Why am I not able to say that no? Why is this conversation so difficult, so challenging?
That's one of the things we look at in therapy, helping us to, when we go to therapy, we're hoping to understand ourselves a little bit better.
Mm.
You know, I think awareness is a very powerful thing because it always gives you a choice. You choose to do what you normally do because it could be the best course of action, but you could choose something different. You understand how and why you react the way you do. Gives you a choice.
Well said.
Who who would be your hero? Who do you idolize?
My hero.
Yeah.
Okay, from the time I was a kid. So my hero is, I think he's what, 98, 99 years old now.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a kid, I used to watch Discovery and Nat Geo. That's probably the only thing I watch on TV now. And the commentaries were by David Attenborough. They were
Oh,
so
yeah.
captivating. There was no
Yeah.
HD television that point in time, but his words, his tone, his storytelling, it is magical.
He's mentioned
He must be near
recently.
his 100th birthday, but he's
Yeah.
my permanent idol.
You
I've
mentioned
grown
earlier
up
about
love.
patience.
Oh,
I was just
yes.
going to say he when he's narrating something, he always sounds very patient.
And
Mm.
the other person I idolize or I'm a big fan of, I don't know if you know Indian cinema, Bollywood, which is Shah Rukh Khan. I cannot not say that he's my idol because he's very, very respectful to everyone. He makes sure everyone is heard.
Mm.
Everyone is important. So he becomes important because everyone thinks they're important with him.
Yeah,
I think that's what he communicates. He's such a wonderful, you know,
I think there is something to be
person to look
said.
up to and learn from.
I think there's something very powerful in someone who becomes very successful, very good at what they do, very famous, very wealthy, and so on. And yet they can still treat other people with common decency.
I
I
mean,
know.
this is like I've
Mhm.
not heard it from one person, but
Mhm.
I think countless interviews and countless, you know, things on TV and everywhere that
Mhm.
he will, come to drop the last person, even each and every person who's come to his party, he'll come and drop him right up to the car. So
Mhm.
why does he need to do that?
It's in his
I
nature.
mean,
He's a nice guy.
exactly, exactly.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
what I mean to say is, you need to come your personality, your tone, your diction, the way you deal with people, the
Mhm.
non-verbal cues that you give in your communication. It's not only the words that you speak, but how you're communicating with the world is how the world responds to your communication.
Yeah, how you present yourself. Yeah, how you carry yourself with other people. Yeah, I
People
think
are not idiots. They
yeah.
they they read they read you throughout.
They read you better than you think they do. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
No amount of filters work there.
That's right. Um, asked you a moment ago about strengths. What would you consider to be, would you call it a weakness or would you call it an area that you feel as if you need to develop? What would you consider that to be?
Oh, I have a very big weakness. So I get too attached, when
Mhm.
I'm working on something. Sometimes I get very involved and I look at a very zoomed in picture of things around me.
Okay.
I need to consciously tell myself to step back and to look at the bigger picture and then detach myself from the situation or, the people I'm working with. So I think I need to learn how to stay detached. I have a very dear friend who's a mental health expert and one of the biggest doctors, mental health doctors in India. And I ask him often, I said, how do you talk to so many people and meet so many people with so many mental health challenges? And somebody is fighting addiction, somebody is fighting something. How do you keep your sanity intact? How do you not get affected? So he told me, he says, there's a shell around me. Nobody crosses that space.
Mm.
So I still have to find that shell around me. I get too involved, I get too attached.
I think if we have a passion for something, it can be quite difficult not to feel as if we become over involved. It's like we invest so much in the outcome. Yeah,
I
it can
think
be hard to sometimes detach yourselves from that. Where can people find you?
Oh, I'm super easy. Very, very easy. You remember the word communicate, you remember 101. So I'm communicate 101. So you go on Insta, look for the hashtag communicate 101. There I am. You go on the web, you type communicate101.com. There I am. My podcast is Communicate 101 Speaking Writing Tips. So basically, it's just Communicate 101. And I base my episodes based on the questions that people ask me. So I would just request everyone to follow and absolutely be sure to mail me your questions because I base them on your questions. I want to do something, I want to work on something that you would like me to work on.
Yeah, I think
Some
it's
communication problem that you have, I would like to address that rather than just, blowing my own horn.
no, I would agree with you. I mean, I'm the same with my audience. I cover topics people want me to cover. If it was up to me, I'd be talking about my little toy collection or something. Um, that being said, sometimes you get so many requests and you get a backlog of them, so it's hard to find a balance. What I sometimes do is I try to answer as many questions in the one video. Maybe that's
Ah,
maybe that's cheating. I hope it isn't, but that's what I try to do. But I think asking your audience what they want you to cover is a really good way of getting engagement. So
yeah. And I think you also have the luxury of doing, being on YouTube and the video podcasting. So I still haven't brought myself onto that video stage. I'm still on the audio version, very happy doing the audio podcasts. And
I'm the opposite. I've recently started the audio thing. I started the video first, but well, I think it's good. I think the podcast, what I like about podcasts is you can listen to a podcast anywhere. I can listen to a podcast while I'm ironing clothes, with an earphone in, or if I'm,
yes,
vacuuming the stairs or something.
yes.
And even if I'm taking my dog out for a walk, I can listen to a podcast. I think podcasts are great for that because you can listen to them anywhere.
I
But
agree.
what I like
I
about
agree.
YouTube is if you're watching a video on YouTube, yeah, you can still listen to it. It could be in the background as you're doing what you're doing. But if you're on YouTube, you can see the person who's talking. So there's a little something going on there as well as it feels like a
It
bit
it
more.
adds to the connection. I
Yeah,
mean,
adds to the
you
connection, as I
you
say.
believe what you see. It's always good to put a name to a face.
Yeah, absolutely.
So so
Well, listen, Sergey, it's been absolutely great talking to you. I've learned a lot, and I hope the people watching or listening have learned something as well. Do be sure to tap into Sarika's social media. Follow her podcast. There is some really good stuff on that. I told you before, I've been stalking you. I've been listening to more of your episodes. So there is some good information in that. There's some really good practical tips. So by all means, have a look. Sarika, maybe we could do this again sometime.
absolutely, Darren. It's been absolutely wonderful talking to you, and I think the conversation can just go on.
That's it.
And
When I
I think it will go on. We'll have lots of things to talk about.
when I start, I can't stop.